Welcome, the anointed ones. What's more terrifying than being watched? Realizing the watchers are no longer content to stay hidden. For months, eyes you've never seen have been studying you with surgical precision. Not the clumsy kind of snooping you picture in spy movies, but the quiet, clinical patience of professionals who've made a science out of staying invisible. According to a 2023 cybersecurity report, more than 3 billion hours of human activity are monitored globally every single day, and that's just the part we know about. But this isn't just a statistic, it's a stage, and you're at the center of it. Now the silent spectators have decided the shadows aren't enough. They're stepping forward, demanding a face-to-face. Not because you've slipped, but because you've done something far more unnerving. You've become unpredictable. Surveillance can log your footsteps, your clicks, your patterns, but it can't quantify your transformation. That's why they want you in the same room. And here's the twist no one talks about. After months of watching you like a mystery series they can't stop binging, the watchers are just as anxious about meeting you as you are about meeting them. Think about it. You've lived your life. They've studied it frame by frame. You're the lead actor, but they're the obsessed fans who finally scored backstage passes. So buckle up. This isn't paranoia, this is power shifting. Their request for a meeting isn't an invitation. It's an admission that distance no longer works. In the next few moments, you'll understand exactly why their hunger for a face-to-face means they're already losing their grip. Number 1. Surveillance was never about data. It was about your pattern of defiance. They didn't watch you to collect random bits of data. They weren't just keeping tabs on your movements, habits, or conversations like a nosy neighbor. Their real interest was never about the surface details of your life. It was about decoding the deeper rhythm of how you operate. They wanted to understand why you haven't collapsed under pressures that would have broken most people. Every hour of surveillance, every hidden note, every quiet recording wasn't about knowing you. It was about charting the pulse of your defiance. They weren't logging your actions so much as they were trying to measure your refusal to bend. That's the one thing technology and human observation still can't easily predict: the unteachable instinct to resist. This kind of scrutiny isn't neutral. It's not just about cameras, files, or following your digital footprint. It's psychological reconnaissance. They study your timing, your pauses, your way of responding to injustice. They're trying to plot a pattern where there isn't one, because the real pattern isn't in what you do, but in what you refuse to do. They've seen you walk away when others would stay, speak up when others would fold, and keep your integrity when compromise would have been easier. That's the currency they're after. Not your secrets, but the architecture of your backbone. And here's the irony. In trying to decode your defiance, they've revealed their own. They've shown how much control matters to them, how deeply threatened they feel by someone who can't be scripted. In some way, they've been forced to study a language they don't actually speak, the language of inner freedom. They can measure your steps, but they can't measure the principle that moves them. That's why they're restless now. All the months of watching have taught them this. The very thing they wanted to break or copy is the one thing they can't touch. They've learned your movements, but not your core, and the gap between those two has become unbearable for them. That is why the watchers are demanding a face-to-face, not to gain new information, but to try to stand in front of what they could never capture from afar. Number 2, the face-to-face is not a meeting. It's an extraction. When the watchers call you in for a meeting, it isn't a polite invitation. It's not a chance to clear the air or have a casual conversation. It's a calculated move to pull from you the one thing they couldn't capture from a distance: your presence. All the months of surveillance have given them data, but data is sterile. It has no pulse, no energy, no unpredictable essence. They've had your actions, your words, your movements in fragments, but never the full force of you in real time. That is what the face-to-face is about. It's an attempt to extract what can't be recorded, your aura, your unguarded truth, the part of you that doesn't live in files or digital footprints. The watchers know that distance has limits. From afar, they can study patterns, build profiles, and draw conclusions. But there is always a gap between observation and embodiment. You can't truly understand someone's conviction or resilience until you're standing in front of them, breathing the same air. This is what makes their move both bold and desperate. They are stepping out of the shadows, not because they are confident, but because they are running out of ways to interpret you without being in your presence. The meeting isn't about gathering new evidence. It's about trying to experience, even momentarily, the power they've been circling for months but couldn't access. There's also an undercurrent of hunger in it. They've built a narrative of who you are, and now they want to test if that narrative holds up when you're standing in front of them. They want to see if you're as unshakable as you've appeared, if your eyes match the strength they've sensed from afar. They're not just after answers, they're after confirmation. The irony is that the closer they get, the more they risk unraveling the control they've worked so hard to maintain. In reaching for your essence, they're also exposing their own vulnerability. They're showing that surveillance wasn't enough. They're admitting, without saying it, that the distance that once protected them from your reality is now the very thing they can't stand any longer. This face-to-face is not a neutral meeting. It's their final, anxious attempt to touch what they couldn't capture. Number 3, watching you was their training ground. You became the curriculum. They weren't just watching you. They were studying you as if your life were a living textbook. What began as surveillance turned into education. Every move you made, every choice you took under pressure, every boundary you held became a kind of lesson they could not find anywhere else. They weren't only monitoring your actions, but also trying to decode the principles behind them. You became their unofficial curriculum on resilience, self-control, and strategy. And unlike theories on paper, you were a living demonstration of how those principles hold up in real life. This is why their files on you grew thicker, but their understanding remained thin, because you weren't a subject to be observed. You were a system they were trying to learn from. For months, they've been gathering notes, not just about what you do, but how you do it. They've watched how you hold your composure under stress, how you navigate traps without becoming bitter, how you speak truth without losing your calm. They've seen the difference between someone who survives and someone who transforms. All of it has shaped how they think about control, loyalty, and even human nature itself. In this way, you became a kind of mirror they were forced to study themselves in. Now the face-to-face is their final exam. It isn't about intimidation or even negotiation. It's about validation. They've learned the theory of your strength from a distance. Now they want to experience the force of it directly. They need to know if what they've seen from afar is as unshakable up close. In their minds, this meeting will either confirm their conclusions or collapse them. They're not coming to interrogate you as much as they're coming to measure themselves against you. The irony is that in trying to understand you, they've already revealed their own blind spots. They thought they were in control of the experiment, but the longer they watched, the more they became the subjects. Your life has quietly tested their limits, their patience, their values, even their ability to stay hidden. By demanding a meeting, they're not just crossing a line, they're stepping into the very lesson they've been trying to learn, and you're still the one holding the answers they can't quite grasp. Number 4, the moment they show themselves is the moment their power breaks. When the watchers finally reveal themselves, They're not demonstrating control, they're exposing a fracture. Surveillance only works when it's invisible, when you're never sure if you're being observed, when the power is in the guessing. That uncertainty is their strongest weapon because it keeps you in a state of quiet anticipation, constantly adjusting yourself to a presence you can't name. The moment they step into the light, that weapon disintegrates. Mystery becomes material. Fear turns into a face you can read, a body you can measure, a voice you can challenge. They know this, which is why staying hidden is their first rule. Invisibility lets them collect, speculate, and manipulate without accountability. But when they step out of the shadows, it's not because they suddenly chose honesty. It's because their methods have failed. It's a sign that distance no longer works, that watching without touching no longer gives them leverage. They've run out of ways to interpret you without exposure, and exposure is always risky. This is also the moment their advantage begins to flip. By showing themselves, they've lost the one thing surveillance thrives on, asymmetry. For months they had all the sight and none of the vulnerability. Now, by appearing, they surrender some of their protection. They can be identified, read, even predicted. Their mystery collapses under the weight of their own presence. Intimidation becomes their last card. They step forward hoping the shock of their appearance will unsettle you. But in reality, it's an admission of weakness. It means they couldn't destabilize you from a distance. It means they need proximity to make an impact. And when a system built on secrecy is forced into visibility, its power isn't amplified, it's diluted. This is the paradox of surveillance. The more it reveals itself, the less it can control. When the watchers come into view, they're not stepping into dominance. They're stepping into a space where you can finally see their edges, their limits, and their desperation. And once you see that, the fear they built around themselves starts to crumble. Number 5, they don't want to meet you. They want to contain the myth they created. For months, they've been piecing together fragments of your life, every move, every choice, every silence. But those fragments didn't just form a profile. They built a myth. In their files, you're no longer just a person. You're a story, a puzzle, an anomaly they can't fully grasp. Every act of defiance, every time you refused to break, every moment you acted outside their predictions, fed into a legend that's now larger than the reality they began with. They started out trying to understand you, but instead they've created something far more dangerous to them, an uncontrollable narrative. That narrative has weight. It travels beyond their walls, shaping how they see you and how others might see you. You're no longer just an individual. You've become a symbol of something they can't quantify. Resilience without compromise, unpredictability without chaos. Symbols are powerful because they're untouchable. You can't interrogate them. You can't punish them. You can't break them down into numbers or files. This is what has been haunting them. The realization that in trying to confine you to their observations, they've elevated you into something they can't easily manage. The so-called meeting isn't about connecting. It's about shrinking. They want to bring you into a room, into their space, into their control because they believe proximity will strip away the mystery. They want to look you in the eye and tell themselves this is just a person, not an idea. They're hoping to see flaws, doubts, or cracks they can use to rewrite the story and collapse the myth back into a manageable human being. But this desire reveals their fear. They're not summoning you out of confidence. They're summoning you because the myth has grown bigger than their capacity to contain it. They're hoping that up close you'll be smaller than the legend, that the aura they've built around you will dissolve under fluorescent lights and face-to-face conversation. What they don't realize is that myths aren't built out of distance alone. They're built out of truth lived consistently under pressure. And that truth doesn't shrink just because someone is standing in the same room. By calling you in, they're not controlling the legend. They're walking straight into it. Number 6, your silence hasn't protected you. Your clarity has. It wasn't your silence that kept you safe. Silence only delays confrontation. It doesn't stop it. What shielded you was something far rarer and far more powerful: clarity. Clarity isn't about withholding information or staying mysterious. It's about having a steady core that can't be twisted, even when everything around you is designed to confuse. They've been watching you long enough to notice that you're not erratic. You don't swing wildly between positions. You don't contradict yourself to please whoever's in front of you. That consistency is what unsettles them. It's proof you're not living reactively, but intentionally. Most people can be pressured into incoherence. Under stress, they change their story, contradict their values, and blur their boundaries. This is how manipulation works, by creating enough noise and panic that a person's internal compass starts spinning. But with you, they've seen the opposite. Even when circumstances were engineered to make you lose your footing, you stayed aligned. Even when baited, you didn't break character. That's not silence, that's coherence. And coherence is unbreakable because it isn't about hiding, it's about knowing. This is the real reason they're unsettled. Silence can be penetrated with enough prodding, but clarity can't. You're not hiding a secret they can uncover. You're anchored in a truth they can't distort. This makes their usual tools useless. They can't catch you in a lie you're not telling. They can't use contradictions that don't exist. They can't bait you into revealing something you're not ashamed of. In a world where most people are an algorithm of triggers and reactions, you've proven to be a closed loop of your own principles. And so, what they once thought was a shield of secrecy has turned out to be something much stronger. It's not the absence of words, but the presence of integrity. You've been untouchable not because you stayed hidden, but because you stayed whole. That's what terrifies them. Not that you're silent, but that you're steady. They can't manipulate a person who won't contradict themselves, and they can't break someone whose actions already match their convictions. Number 7, the watcher's greatest fear isn't you running, it's you speaking. What unsettles the watchers isn't the idea of you disappearing or escaping their grip. They've already built contingency plans for that. They know how to track movement, trace steps, and anticipate physical behavior. Running is predictable. It's an outcome they can model. But speaking is chaos to them. One sentence from you, delivered face to face, can undo months or even years of their careful narrative building. Words carry a power movement never can. They can shift perception in an instant. They've invested everything into controlling the story about you. They've stitched together fragments, rumors, and half-truths to create an image that serves their agenda. That image only works as long as you don't directly challenge it. Once you do, their scaffolding starts to tremble. A single clear statement from you can cut through the fog they've built around your identity, and when clarity meets deception, deception crumbles fast. They know this, which is why they'd rather watch you quietly than stand within earshot of your truth. The face-to-face isn't just proximity, it's risk. In that moment, you're no longer a file, a case study, or a rumor. You're a living presence capable of dismantling their work with nothing more than a few words. They can control context, but they can't control resonance. The way truth, once spoken, vibrates far beyond the room it's spoken in. That's why they've spent so long staying invisible. As long as they're hidden, they can write the script. As soon as you speak in their presence, they lose authorship. This is their real fear. Not escape, but exposure. Not your movement, but your revelation. They're terrified of the moment your voice intersects with their narrative because it's the one force they can't predict or preempt. Movement they can chase. Silence they can fill with speculation. But your words, your direct, unfiltered, undeniable words, are a force no surveillance can neutralize. And they know once you speak, their story isn't just weakened, it's gone. Number 8. They're not summoning you to question you. They're summoning you to measure themselves. They're not calling you in to interrogate you. They already have the answers they think they need, the files, the footage, the patterns. What they don't have is the courage to confront what those files have revealed about them. Every moment they've spent watching you has also been a moment of comparison between your endurance and their compromise, between your refusal to bend and their eagerness to comply. They've been staring at a standard they couldn't meet. Now they're stepping out of the shadows not to probe you, but to measure themselves against the very thing they couldn't break. This summons is less about control than it is about proximity. They want to stand close enough to see if your steadiness feels real, if your strength is tangible, if you're as unshakable up close as you appeared from a distance. It's not about extracting information from you, it's about extracting validation for themselves. They've been carrying their own unease, their own shame for playing their part in something corrosive, and they're hoping that by being near you they can feel smaller, less guilty, less complicit. They're hoping your presence will somehow neutralize the discomfort they've been trying to ignore. But this is where their strategy betrays them. You can't shrink shame by standing next to what caused it. You can't erase the discomfort of seeing someone you tried to break simply by appearing in front of them. In fact, proximity magnifies it. The same clarity that protected you from their manipulation also turns into a mirror for their choices. By summoning you, they're inadvertently summoning their own reflection. Every unbroken piece of you becomes a silent indictment of their actions and their limits. They may enter the room thinking they're in control, but the truth is, they're stepping into a test of their own character, not yours. They're confronting the evidence of everything they couldn't corrupt, everything they couldn't reduce, everything they couldn't make ordinary. They're not there to measure your weaknesses. They're there because your strength has forced them to measure their own. And when they do, most of them will find the comparison heavier than they're prepared to carry. Number 9. The face-to-face is a trap designed to test your spiritual immunity. All those months of surveillance weren't just about tracking your habits or studying your behavior. They were about reading your spirit. Every gesture, every reaction, every decision under pressure was mapped like coordinates on a hidden chart. They weren't only looking for information, they were searching for weak points, not just physical or psychological, but spiritual. They've been trying to figure out what sustains you, what fuels your composure, and where your inner defenses might have cracks. This hasn't been ordinary observation. It's been reconnaissance of your energy, your faith, your unseen anchors. Now, the so-called meeting is their field test. They've built theories about your resilience, but theories aren't enough. They want to be in the room with you, to feel the temperature of your presence, to apply pressure up close and see if your spiritual core still holds. This isn't an invitation to talk, it's an attempt to puncture. They're hoping that by collapsing the distance and forcing proximity, they can trigger reactions they've never seen before. A slip of anger, a flicker of doubt, a moment of surrender. Anything that tells them your strength is only surface deep. The real trap isn't the room or the questions. It's the energy of the encounter itself. They're betting that face-to-face contact will destabilize the alignment you've kept from a distance. They're counting on the human instinct to shrink under scrutiny, to waver when eyes lock and pressure rises. They want to watch your composure crumble in real time so they can finally file you away as predictable, controllable, ordinary. But what they're underestimating is that your armor isn't a performance you put on, it's who you are. Spiritual immunity isn't built from silence or distance. It's built from years of being tested, from holding your ground when no one was watching, from surviving the very conditions designed to erode you. If your strength was superficial, it would have cracked long before this. By stepping into the room, they're not entering a space where you're vulnerable. They're stepping into the very field they've been trying to map and discovering it's impenetrable. The trap they've set for you is really a trap for themselves. Number 10. They can watch your body, but they can't watch your becoming. They've been tracking your movements like clockwork. Where you go, who you see, what you do. They've filled their files with timestamps, footage, and patterns, thinking that if they can map your external life, they'll know who you are. But surveillance, no matter how advanced, only captures motion. It can show a body moving through space, but it can't record the inner shifts, the invisible transformations that happen beneath the surface. They're watching for a fixed pattern in a person who's no longer fixed. By the time they think they've pinned you down, you've already become someone new. This is the flaw in their entire operation. They believe identity is static, that once they've profiled your habits, they've captured your essence. But becoming doesn't follow patterns. It's fluid, unpredictable, and silent. You grow in places they can't see, evolve in ways they can't anticipate. They can record your footsteps, but not your evolution. And that evolution is what makes you untouchable. It means every time they're sure they've mapped your vulnerabilities, they're actually looking at an outdated version of you. Their files are essentially time capsules of someone you no longer are. They're trying to control a ghost, to manipulate an older self who doesn't exist anymore. This is why you've stayed one step ahead without even trying, not because you're hiding, but because you're changing faster than they can measure. You're not playing their game of predictability. You're redefining yourself while they're still studying last season's version. This is what terrifies them most. They can anticipate behavior but not transformation. They can measure your physical presence but not your spiritual expansion. They can chart your route but not your rebirth. They're realizing that all their surveillance does is give them a picture of where you were, never who you are now. And by the time they call you in for a face-to-face, they're not meeting the person they've been watching. They're meeting someone they've never truly seen before. That's the power of becoming. It renders surveillance obsolete. It makes their entire effort not just futile, but outdated the moment it's documented. Number 11. What they recorded is a biography of their own obsession. Every document they've compiled, every grainy image they've hoarded, every scribbled note they've hidden away wasn't really about you at all. It was about them. They thought they were gathering evidence to define you, to categorize you, to break you down into something manageable. But what they've really built is a living biography of their own obsession. The files don't reflect your life. They reflect the time, energy, and fixation they've poured into trying to decipher it. Each entry is a confession of how much space you've taken up in their minds. The truth is, surveillance says more about the watcher than the watched. It reveals what they fear, what they desire, what they're desperate to control. In every photo and report, they weren't just chronicling your movements, they were chronicling their own compulsion. The more they tried to pin you down, the more they exposed their inability to let go. The more they recorded, the clearer the portrait became, not of you, but of their own hunger to understand something they couldn't own. This is why the weight of their files feels strange even to them. They expected to find clarity, a neat profile, a predictable subject. Instead, they've built an archive of their own unease. Every timestamp marks another hour they couldn't stop thinking about you. Every grainy image is a snapshot of their own inability to look away. Every page is a map of the gap between what they can see and what they can never touch. By calling you in for a face-to-face, they're not closing a chapter, they're confronting their own story. Because what they hold in their hands isn't proof of your actions, but proof of their obsession. And obsession always carries a cost. The more you watch something you can't control, the more it starts to reveal what you can't control in yourself. That's the hidden truth inside all their recordings. They thought they were documenting your life, but they've really been documenting the slow unraveling of their own. Number 12. They need the face-to-face to confirm you're still human. Months of distant observation have stripped you of your humanity in their eyes. They've turned you from a living, breathing person into a dossier, a code name, an archetype. You're not you anymore to them. You're a case study, a category, a theory. The longer they've watched, the less real you've become. It's easier that way. It spares them the guilt of what they're doing. It allows them to believe they're studying a subject, not stalking a soul. But there's a hidden cost to this dehumanization. It distorts their perception until they can't tell where the facts end and the myth begins. This is why they now crave a face-to-face. It's not really about control or intimidation. It's about grounding themselves in something tangible. They need to see your eyes, hear your voice, watch you breathe. They need to remind themselves you're flesh and blood, because the longer they've observed you from a distance, the more you've become an idea that haunts them. And ideas are dangerous because they're untouchable. They can't reconcile the image they've built with the living person behind it, so they're pulling you into their space to make it real again. It's a survival tactic for their own conscience. As long as you're a file, they can keep doing what they're doing. They can justify it, they can detach from it, but meeting you is like breaking the fourth wall of their own narrative. Suddenly, the subject has a heartbeat, the target has a voice, the archetype becomes a person, and that shift forces them to feel the weight of their choices, the ethics of their actions, the invasiveness of their gaze. What they're hoping is that proximity will make you smaller, more ordinary, easier to contain. They want to anchor you back into flesh so their conscience can exhale. But what they don't realize is that the opposite often happens. The moment they stand before the person they've dehumanized, the myth doesn't dissolve. It sharpens. It becomes undeniable. Meeting you won't shrink you, it will expose them. Because the real power of your humanity isn't in being seen, it's in making them see themselves. Number 13. This isn't their first face-to-face, it's their last attempt at influence. When watchers finally step out from behind the curtain, it's not a show of strength, it's a signal of depletion. They've already tried everything else: distance, surveillance, manipulation from the shadows, and all the subtle methods meant to keep you off balance. None of it worked. What's left now is exposure, and exposure is a move of last resort. The face-to-face isn't their first act of power, it's their final gamble. They're betting that proximity will accomplish what distance could not. Control is strongest when it's invisible. As long as they're hidden, they can rewrite the script, control the narrative, and maneuver without consequence. But the moment they appear in person, they lose that invisibility. They lose the asymmetry that made them powerful. A shadow can be anywhere. A body has limits. A hidden force is mysterious. A revealed face is just another person, with flaws, tells, and vulnerabilities. By revealing themselves, they've already forfeited the most potent weapon surveillance gives them: anonymity. This is why their move says more about them than about you. It's not an escalation of power. It's a confession of weakness. They're showing you that everything else has failed. They couldn't destabilize you with silence. They couldn't break you with speculation. They couldn't trap you with contradictions. Now the meeting is their last flicker of influence, the final card they know how to play. And the irony is that it rarely works. By the time watchers are forced into the open, they're already behind. Their plan depends on you being predictable, but what they're walking into is an encounter with someone who's already outgrown their tactics. What they think will intimidate you may end up revealing their own desperation. This isn't the start of their control over you. It's the slow, visible end of it. The face-to-face doesn't mark the beginning of a new game. It marks the moment the old one collapses and they're left with nothing but their own exposure. Number 14. The watchers have inadvertently built you a throne. Every hour they've spent watching you has been an hour spent building your legend. Surveillance is meant to shrink a person, to strip them of privacy, confidence, and mystery. But when it fails, it does the opposite. It magnifies. By following every move, cataloging every decision, archiving every detail, they've turned you into a figure larger than life. Instead of diminishing you, their obsession has sculpted an image of you that even they can't control. Without realizing it, they've built you a throne, not of your choosing, but of their own fixation. This is the hidden paradox of long-term observation. The more attention they give, the more significance they create. Their files aren't neutral records. They're a shrine of sorts. Every note, every photo, every late-night analysis is an act of recognition. It's them saying over and over that you matter, that you are unpredictable, that you are worth the hours and resources. The throne isn't ceremonial. It's built from their own sleepless nights, their whispered theories, and their inability to look away. Now they're demanding a face-to-face. But if you strip away the theatrics, what they're really doing is approaching what they've elevated. They're trying to bring down what they've raised up, hoping that proximity will humanize you, flatten you, make you manageable again. Yet the deeper truth is harder to swallow. The moment they walk into the same room as you, they're not summoning you. They're presenting themselves. They're coming to stand before the very figure they've created in their own minds. That's the power they've handed you without meaning to. You didn't have to ask for a throne. Their obsession built it. You didn't demand reverence. Their fixation gave it. By stepping out of the shadows, they're not asserting authority. They're acknowledging yours. What they intended as a meeting has the undertones of an audience, and they're the ones who've positioned themselves as supplicants. Their surveillance may have begun as a way to control, but its unintended consequence was coronation. Now, face to face, they're kneeling before what they've helped create. For months, they've tried to stay invisible. They've whispered, plotted, and stared from a distance, believing that watching you was a form of control. But every hidden camera, every file, every silent note didn't reduce you. It elevated you. Without realizing it, they built you a narrative, and that narrative became too large for them to hold. They turned you into a symbol, an idea, an archetype of resilience. And now, after all this time, they've stepped out of the shadows because the myth they created has outgrown their reach. The face-to-face they demand isn't a show of dominance. It's a confession. It's proof that their tactics have failed. They could record your steps, but they couldn't record your becoming. They could build a dossier, but they couldn't capture your clarity. They could watch your silence, but they couldn't stop your truth. Each attempt to contain you only proved how uncontainable you are. Each file is a portrait of their obsession, not your weakness. This meeting, this so-called confrontation, is not a beginning. It's an ending. It's the final flicker of influence from people who once thought they could orchestrate your story from the shadows. In reality, all they've done is crown you with a power they don't understand. Their surveillance was meant to erase your humanity, but it has only exposed their own. And when they finally stand before you, they're not summoning you to answer their questions. They're standing in front of what they helped create. This is the truth your viewers need to see. Every hidden eye, every whisper, every attempt at intimidation has been inverted into your elevation. What they built to control you became the throne you now sit on. Their secret hope was that a face-to-face might shrink you. What they'll discover is that it will reveal them. This is not a trap for you. It's a mirror for them. If this resonated with you, if you felt watched, underestimated, or misunderstood, know that your clarity, not your silence, is what keeps you untouchable. And if you want more brutally honest, deeply rooted, and eye-opening truths like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the like button, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, and don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your engagement helps this message reach more people who are ready to see behind the curtain. Together, we're building a space for truth that can't be surveilled, only seen. God bless you.